She held the microphone with shaking hands, looking at the audience and the cameras. Everyone was waiting for her decision, but he, sitting in the dock of the live program, kept his eyes lowered, as if only now he understood the weight of the humiliation. Years before, it was on that same kind of stage, improvised at a party for millionaires, that he exposed her to ridicule, laughing at her voice, her accent, her simplicity. The video went viral. She was called the girl with the duck voice. They laughed, they mocked, they forgot. He became even more famous. She disappeared. Now, live on national television in front of millions, she was the one who had the floor, and the same voice he had despised was about to decide his fate, and she knew exactly what to say. The audience held their breath as she took a deep breath and said, "Do you remember that voice?" The silence was piercing. The host, confused, looked at the script. There was nothing there that predicted this, but she continued. "That voice was the butt of jokes. Your laughter still echoes in my dreams. But by divine irony, that same voice, today, is the only one that can give you a second chance." The man, once arrogant, was now sweating. Behind the cameras, producers rushed to try to understand what was happening, but it was too late. The decision had been transferred to her by a surprise vote from the audience. The program, which was supposed to reward young entrepreneurs with millionaire mentors, was now having a live scandal, and the mentor who had humiliated a contestant in the past depended on the compassion of the same woman he had tried to destroy, and if that same voice, once despised, now has the power to decide, then it is clear that nothing remains hidden forever. If you believe this, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and continue with us. The audience stood up and applauded as the spotlights turned on the 5 candidates selected for the most-watched entrepreneurship reality show in the country. The stage, lit in blue and gold tones, reflected the dreams of millions who wanted to be there. Among the judges, all millionaires and influential people, he was the center of attention. Ryan Carter, creator of the most profitable app of the last decade, influential, ironic, and adored by the public for his funny arrogance. Everyone laughed at his sharp phrases. The audience wanted a show, and he delivered. But that night, something in his posture was different. On the left side of the stage, a young woman was waiting her turn. She was wearing a light, simple suit and holding the microphone firmly. There was something in her eyes that was not intimidated by the lights, nor by the other competitors. Her name was Emily Grace, and that was the moment she had been waiting for years. No one there knew that the young woman with the sweet voice carried a past that connected her directly to the man who was now adjusting his jacket and smiling for the cameras. No one knew that the two had crossed paths before, and that he had been responsible for the most painful video of her life. Emily looked at the judges one by one, and when Ryan's eyes met hers, a slight discomfort passed over his face. He looked back at her with the same air of superiority with which he looked at everyone, but he hesitated for a second. She just smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was a smile that hid a story. The presenter called her name. "Emily Grace, now it's your turn." The lights turned completely on her, and the audience fell silent. It was time to speak, time to show her project. But she knew that before talking about numbers, she needed to say something that was close to her heart. She took a deep breath. Her voice was firm, but with that soft timbre that had accompanied her since she was a child. "Good evening. Before I present my idea, I want to tell you a little story." Ryan rolled his eyes. He already didn't like candidates who went off script. Emily didn't. "Look away. Years ago, someone told me that my voice was a source of shame, that I could never be taken seriously because of the way I spoke. He didn't know me, but he decided to ridicule me. That made a deep impression on me." Some people in the audience frowned, trying to remember if they had heard that voice somewhere before. Ryan crossed his arms, bored. Emily continued. "Today, I'm here to show that even voices that are the target of ridicule can build something great." The audience applauded. Ryan smiled tightly, trying to maintain an air of disinterest. But inside, something was starting to move. Emily was born in a small town where the wind cut more than words, and the eyes of others spoke before she even said a sentence. From a very young age, I knew that the way I spoke was not what others expected. Her voice was too delicate, soft, with a slight husky tone from birth. At school, they laughed whenever she was called to read aloud. "Say it again," they would say, mockingly. A group even recorded a video of her reciting a poem and posted it on a social network with the caption, "The weirdest voice in school." That was how the scars began. Her father left before she turned 4. Her mother, a seamstress, did her best to keep her daughter on her feet, but she carried within herself a weariness that no thread could mend. She lived in silence, folding fabrics and taking care of voices that could not be heard. Emily grew up hearing that she needed to speak properly if she wanted to be someone. She tried. She practiced in front of the mirror. She studied occult phonetics, but nothing changed the timbre that God had given her, and it was because of this timbre that she began to be silent. She spent recess alone. She carried books everywhere. She dreamed of a world where ideas spoke louder than sounds. At 14, she began writing social impact projects and won a state competition. But no one wanted to interview the girl with the strange voice. A journalist even asked her if she would accept someone else reading her speech. She said no, and she didn't go to the event. Her mother cried, hugging her, saying, "One day someone will hear your voice and change their mind." That phrase stuck inside her for years. The pain didn't just come from the mockery, but from the echo. When everyone is silent, cruelty screams louder. When she turned 18, her mother fell ill. Emily gave up everything to take care of her. She worked as a supermarket, cashier, a telemarketer, and even in a food truck on the road. In each of these places she heard jokes about her voice, jokes about her education, jokes about her posture. But she never fought back. She just smiled and held on to them. Her dream of becoming an entrepreneur and transforming lives was like a seed buried deep, being watered by every silent tear. One day, while cleaning a desk at the end of the day, she overheard a conversation between 2 boys laughing at an old video that had gone viral years before. When she looked at her phone, the world froze. It was her, at 13 years old, reciting the poem. The caption was cruel. The sound of the laughter was even worse. And it was then that she recognized the face of the person who had recorded it. Ryan Carter, at the time an influential young man in his early 20s who had visited the school to give a talk. He had laughed at her, posted it, made it viral. Thousands laughed too. She turned off her phone, took a deep breath and thought, "One day I will no longer run away from my voice," and in that moment the seed began to sprout. It was a gala night in Manhattan. The event, hosted by one of the largest startup accelerators in the country, brought together millionaires, influencers, and promising young entrepreneurs. Ryan Carter had been invited as the most brilliant mind of the decade. He was at the height of his fame, surrounded by cameras, journalists, and sycophants. In the corner of the room, a group of teenagers were participating in a cultural exchange program sponsored by the sponsoring company. They were young people from public schools who had won regional competitions to be there. Among them, Emily, then only 13 years old, was wearing a simple light blue dress, the same one her mother had sewn by hand. She was nervous but happy. It was the first time she had seen successful people up close. During the ceremony, they asked one student from each group to go up on stage to read a quote about the future and hope. Emily was chosen by her group for having the most serene speech. She walked up with timid steps, holding the paper in both hands. Ryan was on stage among the judges. She stood in front of the microphone and began to read. Her voice was low, with the tone that always made the mean ones laugh. And at that moment, a burst of laughter broke out among the guests. Ryan, sitting in front, laughed. But it wasn't just a suppressed laugh. He looked to the side, said something to his friend, and took out his cell phone. He filmed it discreetly. He whispered, "This is going to be a hit." He recorded the entire reading. He mockingly captioned it, "Graduation Speech by the Voice of GPS." He posted it on his stories, and minutes later the video began to be shared in WhatsApp groups, humor forums, and anonymous profiles on X. Emily's face, without knowing it, was going viral. When she got off the stage, she heard muffled laughter. A girl walked by her and imitated her voice. A boy commented, "How sad, she talks like a cartoon character." Emily didn't understand right away. She only found out how serious it was days later when the video reached the school's messaging group. There, her name was associated with cruel nicknames. Her face became a meme. The speech remixed into comedy videos. She remained silent. She didn't tell her mother. She was sick for a week. The school principal tried to cover it up. No one wanted to confront a millionaire. And him? Ryan just gained more followers. For him, it was just another joke, just another night. But for Emily, it was the beginning of a silence that lasted years, a silence that fueled the desire to one day return, not with revenge, but with dignity, with the voice that everyone tried to silence. The live show was taking place in an arena set up especially for the new season of Future Minds, a competition between young entrepreneurs seeking investment from the biggest names in the country. Emily had gone through the early stages with a startup that combined technology and voice accessibility for people with speech disorders. Her project was impressive due to its innovation and sensitivity, but she knew that the hardest part would come when she had to present in front of the main judges. Among them was Ryan Carter. When the show's announcement announced that Emily Grace would be the next to take the stage, Ryan remained relaxed in his chair, with his legs crossed and the same cynical smile as always. Emily entered firmly without hesitation, holding the tablet with her presentation. She used the same tone of voice as always. She hadn't tried to change it. She hadn't trained to sound different. It was her voice, and that's why it was strong. The show had a mechanic in which the judges could interrupt to ask questions at any time. As soon as she started speaking, Ryan raised his hand. "Excuse me, can I ask you something before you continue?" She nodded, looking directly at him. "Have you ever thought about using an automated voice for your presentation, like an artificial intelligence? It would be more impactful." A quiet chuckle ran through the audience. Emily didn't answer right away. The presenter tried to get around the situation. "Let's let the candidate finish, Ryan." But she politely raised her hand. "It's okay. I can answer." Ryan leaned back, confident. Emily took a deep breath. "The technology I developed is precisely so that no one has to hide their own voice, because when we automate even that which is human, we stop listening to what really matters." The audience fell silent. The comment seemed too direct. Ryan smiled disdainfully. "Nice speech. But investors like impact. Voice is packaging." Emily didn't look away. "And soul is content." The back and forth between the two created tension, but she didn't lose focus. She presented firmly. She talked about the numbers, the proposal, the results. With each sentence, her voice. Previously, the butt of jokes filled the arena with authenticity. Ryan began to look at her differently. He still couldn't remember where he'd heard that timbre from, but there was something about it that resonated with him. When she finished, she received a standing ovation. The other judges praised her. The partial vote from the audience gave her the best performance of the night. Ryan remained silent, watching, thinking, and then he asked, "You said this project came from personal pain. Do you want to share?" Emily smiled. "Some wounds heal when we stop hiding them, but I prefer the next phase to reveal more." Ryan frowned. Something in that answer seemed like a code, but he still had no idea that he was in front of the same girl who years ago he had turned into a viral joke. The morning after the presentation, the specialized newspapers were already covering the young revelation of the season. Emily Grace was called the unlikely candidate, the voice that overcame the noise, the surprise of the audition. But behind the scenes, Ryan Carter could not quite digest the spotlight she had received. For years, he had been the center of everything. Now, his name appeared in the background. A producer of the program delivered the partial results of the public vote, and Emily was leading by a large margin. This awakened something in him that he could not name: discomfort. It was then that he decided to use his most subtle weapon, public contempt disguised as sincerity. During the recording of the next live episode, the candidates were invited to participate in a group dynamic, where each mentor had to suggest adjustments to the participants' projects. Emily presented a new function of her app, which allowed users to record their own voices with personalized filters for social inclusion. The other mentors applauded the idea, but Ryan asked to speak. "Emily, I appreciate the effort, but have you ever considered that maybe you're trying to change something that people don't want to change? Not everyone wants to hear strange voices on their devices." The comment fell like a stone in the room. The other judges tried to hide their discomfort. The audience fell silent. Emily firmly asked, "Strange voices?" Ryan smiled, that same smile she remembered from the video. "Don't get me wrong, but your proposal is too idealistic. The world isn't always ready for certain types of intonation." The final word was said with a slight tone of contempt. The camera captured Emily's reaction. Her eyes didn't blink, but inside she relived the same pain from years ago, the same tone, the same laughter, the same attempt to silence what she was. The humiliation no longer came with blatant jokes, but with subtle ironies, molded into supposedly technical arguments. And the worst, in front of millions. Social networks began to react. Some people realized the malice, others laughed. They compared her voice to cartoon characters. They made montages. Once again, she was being reduced to a caricature. The same cycle, the same pain. But now something was different. Emily didn't lower her eyes or flinch. She just took a deep breath and answered, "Maybe the world isn't ready after all. But who said I came here to please the world?" The audience applauded. The judges looked at each other. Ryan gave a half smile, but there was something strange on his face. A trace of discomfort, a fragment of memory, as if the truth was finally beginning to emerge from the shadows. And she knew the turning point was approaching. For the first time, it wasn't her who was shaking. It was him. The production team decided to do a special with the candidates who received the most votes that week. It would be a different kind of program with testimonials, personal stories, and free presentations. Emily was among the chosen ones. She was called to record in a smaller studio with no audience, just her, the host, and the judges, all sitting in a semicircle, with the cameras focused on capturing every emotion. The atmosphere was intimate and at the same time tense. When her turn came, Emily thanked the opportunity and asked permission not to present a pitch. "Today I just want to tell a story that has never been heard in the right way." Ryan's eyes were fixed on her. Something in the way she said "story" made him stop fidgeting with his jacket. Emily held the microphone with both hands, and she began. "Years ago, I was chosen to represent my school at an innovation event. It was a unique opportunity for someone like me, but that day something happened. Someone recorded me and posted the video. The caption was cruel. My voice became the butt of jokes." The atmosphere became icy. The other judges looked away. Ryan kept his face impassive, but his fingers drummed lightly on his knee. "For weeks, I was called things no child should hear. I was silent, but I saw it. I saw the face of the cameraman. I heard the laugh. And I would recognize that tone anywhere." The camera focused on Ryan. For the first time, he swallowed hard. Emily turned her face gently toward him. "It took me years to understand that my voice wasn't a flaw, that the problem wasn't with me, but with the way the world chooses to laugh at what's different." The host tried to intervene, but she waved her hand away. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because I believe change is possible. But change only begins when we acknowledge what we've done." Ryan's breathing was heavier. His eyes for the first time moved away from hers. Emily, with a serene smile, added, "And that's why I created this startup, to give a voice, literally, to those who have been silenced. And if the universe brought me here, in front of the same person who once tried to silence my essence, then maybe it's because the time has come to listen." Absolute silence. The cameras captured every nuance. The internet would explode hours later. But there, in the studio, everything stopped. Emily calmly stood up, handed the microphone to the producer, and left without looking back. Ryan remained seated, motionless. His thoughts were spinning at a speed he couldn't control. That night, he watched the video again. The old video, the caption, the laugh. It was really him. And that was really her. Ryan stayed in the room for more than 20 minutes after the recording ended. The crew was taking down the spotlights. The cameramen were exchanging discreet glances, but no one dared to say anything. He remained seated, staring at the floor, not out of pride, but because, for the first time, he didn't know how to react. He drove home in silence, without playing music, without answering the calls from his advisors. He entered his luxurious loft, but nothing seemed familiar. He opened his laptop, looked up her full name, Emily Grace, and began to search through everything he could. It was her, the girl from the video. The same face, more mature. The same sweet gaze. Now firm. The same voice, now unbeatable. He found old news reports, an outdated blog where she had posted short texts when she was a teenager. One of them read, "If my voice is ever heard, let it not be shouted. Let it be whispered and still heard." Ryan stood up and walked in circles, as if that would be enough to escape the guilt, but it wasn't. On another website, a forum for old videos, he found the original video. It was there, still public, over 2 million views. The comments were cruel. One of them, pinned with many likes, said, "I've never laughed so hard at a voice in my life." The account that had posted it, old, but it was his. Ryan Carter, with his old nickname from his youth, RC Alpha. He had really done it. That wasn't an echo. It was real. The laugh Emily mentioned, it was his. The caption, it was the one he had typed. He closed his laptop. He sat down on the couch. He remembered the lecture he had given that day at school, a favor he had done for a foundation to gain. Image points. He remembered the boredom, the rush, the impatience he felt on that improvised stage. When the girl began to read in a low voice, he laughed. And he didn't even know why. He just followed his impulse. He found it funny, as he always did, as he always made fun of everything that sounded fragile. He posted it on his stories without thinking, and then he forgot. For him, it was just another unimportant moment. But now he knew. For her, it was a turning point. Anger wasn't what consumed him the most. It was shame. Deep, devastating shame. Ryan walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, but didn't drink it. The water overflowed as he stared into space. For the first time, he understood what it meant to have been cruel. Not by accident, but by choice. Because he could. Because he was powerful. And now, it all came back with double the weight. Karma didn't scream. It whispered. With the same voice he tried to silence. The next morning, he didn't show up for the recording of the show. He sent a message to the production team, "I need some time." But time didn't erase anything. The networks already knew. Internet users recovered the original video. They connected the dots. Ryan Carter humiliated the frontrunner years ago was the headline of the trending topics, and in the midst of it all, he could no longer escape the image of a 13-year-old girl in a blue dress, holding a piece of paper in both hands and reading, in a low voice, a poem of hope and himself, younger, arrogant, with no memory of who he might have become. And then, for the first time, he cried. Emily didn't show up for the next recordings. She didn't even respond to messages from the producers. On the call-in board, next to her name, a discreet notice appeared. Temporarily withdrawn from the competition. No one knew the official reason, but the entire country suspected. The videos with her testimony had taken the internet by storm. Thousands of messages supporting her. Hashtags of solidarity, people sharing similar experiences. They also silenced me. My voice was also ridiculed. It was as if, by standing up, Emily had given voice to thousands, and as she walked away, Ryan felt the world crumble around him, slowly as only true consequences can do. Sponsors began to question his presence on the show. The network received open letters demanding a position. Celebrities spoke out. His press office released a statement trying to soften the situation. Mr. Carter deeply regrets any past actions that may have caused pain. But words for the first time were not enough. Emily's absence became a scream, an unfilled space. The chairs remained occupied. The dynamics continued. But it was as if the whole story had been suspended in time. Ryan would wake up in the middle of the night with confused memories. Flashes of the lecture at school, the girl's face on stage, his laughter echoing in the hall. He began to walk the streets aimlessly. He would go into coffee shops for no reason. One morning he saw a young woman with her back to him, with a ponytail and a blue coat. He thought it was her. He quickened his steps. He called out, "Emily?" But the girl turned her face away, confused. It wasn't. He looked down and apologized. That same afternoon he looked for the school where it all began. It was different, more modern. He asked permission to enter. He sat on the bench where she had read the poem years before. No one understood, but he felt. He needed to go back to the beginning, to the root of it all. He wanted to ask for forgiveness, but she wasn't there. He wanted to listen to her, but the silence was absolute. And that silence accompanied him now. In meetings, in interviews, on social media. The audience no longer applauded him like before. The looks on his face were different. Her absence disarmed him, not only because she was responsible for his pain, but because now he missed the only voice that had confronted him with dignity. It was a different kind of emptiness. It wasn't just guilt. It was longing for something he never had, for something he lost without knowing, for the possibility of having done things differently. On a rainy night alone, Ryan called the show's production team. "If she comes back, I want to talk, live, uncut." The producer hesitated. "Are you sure?" He answered without looking away. "This time, yes. For the first time, yes." But Emily didn't answer his calls. She didn't reply to messages. She was silent. But it was a silence that wouldn't shut him up. It was a silence that hurt. And that taught him. Ryan understood that he couldn't run away anymore, because her absence was the only thing he could hear now. The days that followed seemed to speed up while everything around Ryan fell apart in slow motion. The newspapers that had previously portrayed his face as a symbol of genius now portrayed him as an icon of arrogance. The empire of the voice that silenced. Ryan. Carter and the laughter that cost him dearly. The headlines of the country's most important media outlets did not hold back. The brands associated with his name began to issue statements of repudiation. A large technology company suspended a billion-dollar contract. A fast fashion chain withdrew its exclusive line from its stores. The Foundation for the Education of Underprivileged Youth, the same one that had invited him years before to the school where it all began, publicly announced that it repudiated all forms of emotional violence disguised as jokes. And the worst part, the videos continued to circulate. Montages, reactions, old excerpts of his speeches on other programs being reanalyzed in a new light. The persona that had previously been read as bold and witty was now seen as a symbol of elitism, insensitivity, and contempt for the vulnerable. He tried to explain himself. He gave an interview. He said he was a different man back then, that young people make mistakes. But it all sounded rehearsed. The pain he had caused could no longer be erased with memorized words. A hashtag gained momentum. Listen to Emily. And along with it, an avalanche of stories from people who had been humiliated for their appearance, their voice, their background. It was more than just about her now. It was about an entire system, a pattern of exclusion that hid behind laughter and microphones. Ryan cancelled appearances. He avoided going out in public, even in his private. Circle's looks changed. Old friends began to drift away. Partnerships evaporated. For the first time he was alone, not by choice, but by consequence. His company's stock plummeted after investors announced his immediate departure, and the board of directors asked for his resignation. Ryan handed in the letter without discussion. He felt empty, a gaping hole that neither money nor lawyers could fill. The peak of his downfall came when the program Future Minds announced that he would be replaced by another mentor. What's more, the season finale special would be hosted by a surprise guest. The network speculated, and among the rumors, one name stood out strongly: Emily Grace. When Ryan read the headline, he felt something profound, not anger, not fear, but an inevitable recognition. The world was spinning. The same girl he had silenced with a video was now the one taking the microphone on national television, and he no longer had a stage, no applause. All he could do was wait, and perhaps if she came back, ask for what he never thought he needed, forgiveness. But he knew that time would not come back, that words could not be unsaid, and that mocking laughter sometimes became the soundtrack to his own downfall. Ryan woke up at the same time every day, but now for a different reason. It wasn't for meetings, trips, or interviews. It was to walk, that's all. He left the apartment before sunrise and walked through the still empty streets, aimlessly observing people. With a level of attention he'd never had before. He'd started to notice details: a lady pushing a shopping cart with difficulty, a boy selling candy on the subway with a shy voice, a couple arguing silently on the sidewalk. Everything seemed new, as if his eyes were opening for the first time to what had always been there. The deconstruction wasn't instantaneous. At first, he was still irritated by the comments, the cancellations, the sudden loneliness. But little by little, something inside him changed. He stopped looking for distractions. He stopped checking social media. He read books he'd never considered. He watched documentaries about empathy, listened to stories of overcoming obstacles, wrote letters he'd never had the courage to send. One rainy afternoon, he visited a support center for young people with speech disorders. He volunteered without revealing his name. He simply said he wanted to help. He spent weeks there, listening, really listening. Voices that were shaky, halting, unique. Voices he would have mocked in the past. But now each one sounded like poetry. One of the boys, shy, asked, "Have you ever been ashamed of your voice?" Ryan hesitated. Then he answered, "Yes, not mine, but for not listening to other people's." That same week he called the school where he had met Emily. He donated computers, books, and new microphones for the reading room. He asked that his name not be used. He didn't want the spotlight. For the first time, he wasn't looking for applause. He was just doing the bare minimum right. He also visited his mother again, to whom he had barely spoken. He sat down with her one cold morning and confessed everything. He talked about the arrogance, the humiliation, the pain he had caused. She held his hand firmly and said, "You don't have to fix the whole world, son, but you can fix the part that hurt." That phrase has stayed with him ever since. He began to jot down his thoughts in a black notebook, as if he were writing to himself. Short texts, simple sentences. Listening is a way of loving. Silence is also an answer. The voice I tried to erase wakes me up today. One day he received an unexpected invitation. The TV channel was inviting him to watch the recording of the final program in the auditorium, not as a judge, just as a spectator. He almost refused, but something pushed him. He wanted to be there, not to justify himself, but to listen. He sat discreetly in the last row, among strangers. When Emily's name was announced as the special presenter of the evening, the applause exploded, and he silently clapped too. It was the beginning of something new, not an instant redemption, but the first step of someone who was finally beginning to understand what it really means to give voice to others. The studio was packed. It was the grand finale of the show. The audience was dressed in bright colors. The lighting pulsated as if announcing a new era, and the stage had been redesigned to symbolize renewal. In the center, an illuminated circle, the space of truth. Emily entered with calm steps. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Some of them cried. She was not dressed luxuriously, but her presence was majestic. The voice that had once been ridiculed now echoed as a symbol of courage. After presenting the finalist projects and giving a speech about inclusion, empathy, and social innovation, the broadcast indicated that the show was about to end. But before the host ended, Emily asked for the microphone. "Before this stage goes dark today, there is something that still needs to be illuminated." The audience fell silent. The host watched her, confused. She turned to the cameras and said calmly, "There is someone in the audience who has known this story since the beginning, Someone who carried the weight of the wrong choice, but who also had the courage to stay. The cameras searched for her, until a discreet light came on in the last row. Ryan Carter was there. He stood up slowly, visibly thinner, with slightly longer hair and a different look in his eyes. There was no arrogance, there was humanity. Emily's eyes met his. For a few seconds, only silence. She walked to the edge of the stage, held out her hand and said, "If you want to come up, the microphone is open." Murmurs went through the studio. But Ryan didn't hesitate. He came up slowly. The two of them were facing each other. For the first time, on equal footing. The presenter stepped back, respecting the moment. Ryan took the microphone, looked around, then at her. His breathing was heavy. "For a long time, my voice was used to silence others. I laughed, pointed, went viral. And I heard nothing. You taught me to listen." Emily kept her eyes fixed on his. "I'm not here to ask you to publicly apologize. I'm here because if I didn't face what I did, I would never change. You gave me that, even when you could have kept quiet." The audience watched in absolute silence. Emily then reached out for the microphone. "It's not for me to say whether there's been change, but there's one thing you may not have noticed, Ryan. The same voice you mocked is now being broadcast to millions." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "And this time I'm listening." She smiled. "So maybe for once, it's the right time to speak up." She handed the microphone back to the host. Ryan didn't say anything else. He just stepped off the stage and returned to his seat. It wasn't about him anymore. It never had been. It was about all the silenced voices that had finally begun to resonate, and the reunion that seemed unlikely was, in fact, the starting point for a story that no longer depended on justice, but on listening, on presence, on humanity. The show came to an end with the lights slowly dimming, the contestants applauding, and the audience still overcome with emotion at the reunion. Emily walked backstage with calm steps, feeling the light weight of someone who had completed a cycle. A producer approached with a distressed expression. "Ryan asked to see you, he's out there." She nodded. It was no surprise. Something inside her had already known that this moment would come. She walked to the exit hallway, where the cold of the night met the warmth of the studio lights. Ryan was leaning against one of the columns, looking at the floor. When he saw her, he straightened up, but didn't try to hide his tired look. He wasn't the same man he'd been months before. He looked like someone who had been through internal storms. "You came," he said, with a tone more of acknowledgement than relief. Emily stopped a few steps away, maintaining her firm but not hostile posture. "I came because I understand that sometimes we need to end stories in person, to free both sides." He lowered his head. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to look you in the eyes and tell you that I know what I did, and I know there's no way to undo it." She took a deep breath. "No, there isn't, and it's not just about me. It's about all the voices you helped silence. Some perhaps will never speak again." He nodded. His eyes were moist. "But I also know that I wasn't the only one who kept quiet. My whole life I kept quiet when faced with other people's pain. I laughed so I wouldn't hear, I mocked so I wouldn't feel, but now I listen, and I feel." Emily was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You gave me pain, but you also gave me direction. Without knowing it, you pushed me to discover my strength. So I don't hate you, I just don't follow you." Ryan seemed to understand before he even heard. "It's fair," she continued. "Forgiving doesn't mean going back. It means not carrying it anymore. And I choose to move on lightly." He smiled, the smile of someone who accepted. "Thank you for teaching me what I never learned when I had everything." Emily took a step closer. She touched his shoulder lightly and said, in the same voice that had once been the source of laughter, "What you do with what you've learned now is what will define who you truly become." He nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. She turned and walked away unhurriedly, with her head held high. Ryan stood there motionless, watching the woman he had once humiliated leave with the dignity he had spent his life trying to buy, and never had. There was no hug, no wave, just presence, and an absence that now no longer hurt. It was just part of the journey, and she, finally, chose to move on. Alone, but whole. In the last scene, the camera follows Emily from behind, walking down a narrow street in the early morning. The sun has not yet fully risen. The sky is filled with shades of grey, lilac and gold. She carries a simple backpack on her back and holds a small recorder in her hand. She enters an empty coffee shop, smiles at the waiter, and chooses the table closest to the window. She takes the recorder out of her bag, presses a button, and hears her own voice, soft, firm, recorded in an old phrase. If my voice is ever heard, let it not be shouted. Let it be whispered and still heard. She closes her eyes for a few seconds. Then she opens them, with a slight smile on the corner of her mouth. Outside, people rush by, car horns honk in the distance, and a child crosses the street singing softly to herself. Emily watches, takes a deep breath, and goes back to recording. Only now she is not speaking to anyone, only to herself. As her voice fills the space, the camera slowly pulls away. Through the window until it disappears into the sky where the day begins to break, with sound, with silence, and with the promise that not every voice needs to be loud to be heard. If you've come this far, it's because this story touched something inside you. So comment below. The voice they tried to silence is now my strength. This comment shows that you listened with your heart and that your voice matters too. Take advantage and leave a like. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell because stories like this will still surprise you. And now that this journey is over, the next video is already on your screen. Click and come with us. There's a new story waiting for you, and maybe this time, it's yours.